She's a dusty relic. I'm dumping her and the shop next month. Just book the Cabo tickets, Thalia. I was feeding the parking meter outside the Flying Star Cafe on Central Avenue. My husband, Vance, was sitting at a window table inside. He was supposed to be watching our 4-year-old son, Silas. When I walked in, the barista, a 19-year-old kid with a septum piercing, slid my black coffee across the counter. Under the saucer was a folded receipt. On the back, written in blue ink, were 3 sentences. He said he's dumping you. He said book Cabo. He called her Thalia. I looked up. The barista wouldn't meet my eyes. He just wiped down the espresso machine, his jaw tight. I was 31. My hands smelled like lemon oil and brass polish. I was wearing a wool sweater that was unraveling at the left cuff. My husband was 20 feet away, wiping a smudge of chocolate off our son's cheek, looking like the poster boy for Albuquerque fatherhood. Thalia. Thalia wasn't a stranger. Thalia was the commercial real estate agent who supposedly helped us renegotiate our lease. Thalia was the woman who came to my son's 3rd birthday party and brought him a wooden train set. "Everything okay, Odelia?" Vance asked when I sat down. He smiled. His phone was face down on the table. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my coffee in his face. "Fine," I said. "Just tired." 3 hours later, I pulled the business bank statements he thought he had hidden. 4 weeks later, I submitted a public records request that would put him in handcuffs. But to understand how I ended up standing in a municipal building with a manila envelope that ruined his life, I have to take you back. I am an antique dealer. I catalog things. That is how my brain works. I look at an 1890s Victorian mourning brooch and I see the exact repair history in the solder lines. I look at a mid-century credenza and I know exactly which screws aren't original. I notice what belongs and what doesn't. Vance used to say it was my superpower. We met in 2011 when he walked into my first shop in Old Town Albuquerque, New Mexico. He brought in a 1920s silver pocket watch that belonged to his grandfather. He wanted an appraisal. I told him the watch was a cheap replica, but the chain was solid sterling. He laughed, bought me a cup of coffee, and didn't leave my side for 8 years. Vance was a logistics manager for a regional supply company. He wore crisp shirts. He smelled like cedar and clean laundry. He was the kind of man who carried jumper cables in his truck and actually knew how to use them. He was the kind of man who remembered the names of my regular customers and always made sure the shop's sidewalk was shoveled before I arrived on winter mornings. When we got married, he stepped in to help with the shop. "You handle the sourcing and the restoration, Odelia," he told me, his hands resting warmly on my shoulders. "I'll handle the spreadsheets and the tax filings. Let me take that off your plate. You're the artist. Let me be the muscle." I let him, because I loved him, because I was exhausted, because when Silas was born in 2015, I barely had the energy to keep my eyes open, let alone reconcile QuickBooks or balance the monthly ledger. Mr. Gutierrez, the 80-year-old man who originally taught me how to restore antique wood, warned me once. We were in the back workroom sanding down a massive French armoire, and Vance had just left the shop to deposit a stack of checks at the bank. "A thief always looks at the door," Mr. Gutierrez said, blowing a fine layer of dust off the mahogany crown molding. "But a liar looks at your hands." I paused my orbital sander and asked him what he meant. He just tapped his temple, his dark eyes locking onto mine with an unsettling intensity. "Watch what people pay attention to, Odelia. That tells you what they're afraid of. A man who tells the truth looks you in the eye. A man who is spinning a web watches your hands to see if you're reaching for the broom to tear it down." I didn't listen. I was too busy building our life. My dream was to open a second location in Santa Fe, a massive gallery space with exposed adobe walls and high-end curation. I talked about it every night over dinner. I parked that dream when Silas arrived, but Vance promised me we were saving for it. Every time I sold a high-ticket item, a pristine Tiffany lamp, a set of 18th century flatware, a hand-carved Spanish colonial trunk. Vance would log the sale into his laptop, smile at me across the kitchen island and say, "One step closer to Santa Fe, babe." And for years I thought we had something real. I was half right, half. The changes didn't start with a bang, they started with a whisper. Here's the math. Infidelity isn't a sudden explosion. It's a slow leak in the pipes beneath your foundation. You don't notice the water damage until the drywall caves in on your head. The first flag was the iPad password. We kept a shared iPad in the kitchen for recipes, family calendars, and Silas's cartoons. One Tuesday morning, I tried to open it to check a glaze recipe I had saved for a ceramic repair. The screen flashed. It asked for a 6-digit code. We had never used a passcode on that device. I asked Vance about it when he got home from the office. He didn't blink. He was unbuttoning his cuffs, completely relaxed. "Oh, my company forced a security update on all connected devices that access the corporate server. Mandatory policy. The code is Silas's birthday." It was Silas's birthday. I typed it in, the iPad opened to my glaze recipe, and I felt stupid for even asking. I felt like a paranoid, nagging wife. I didn't know it yet, but that habit of cataloging anomalies would save my life. He gave me the code to the iPad, but he had quietly removed his iMessage sync from the device entirely. The second flag was physical. Vance had never been a runner. He lifted weights in the garage occasionally, but cardio was absolutely not his thing. He hated sweating. In February of 2019, he came home with a pair of $200 running shoes, bright neon green and meticulously laced. He said his doctor told him his cholesterol was creeping up, and he needed to take his cardiovascular health seriously. He started running at 6 in the evening. He would be gone for an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. But when he came back, his running shirt barely had a sweat stain. His breathing wasn't heavy. To understand the depth of my blindness, you have to understand the sensory reality of my daily life. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late October. I was in the back workroom of the shop, elbow deep in a restoration project that required every ounce of my focus. It was a 1910s bird's-eye maple vanity that had been painted over with 3 layers of cheap, chalky latex by someone who didn't understand its value. I was using a chemical stripper, a harsh, viscous gel that smelled sharply of methylene chloride and ammonia. It's a violent, aggressive smell, one that burns the back of your throat and makes your eyes water if you don't keep the industrial ventilation fan running on high. I wore thick black neoprene gloves because the solvent would eat right through standard nitrile and blister your skin in seconds. The shop was filled with the rhythmic, wet, glopping sound of my metal putty knife scraping away the dissolved paint, revealing the stunning, honey-colored whorls of the original maple beneath. The wood felt tacky, sweating under the chemicals, but there was a deep, tactile satisfaction in rescuing it. I wiped the stripped surface with a rag soaked in denatured alcohol. The sharp, clean alcohol scent cut through the toxic fog of the stripper, cold and clinical. Vance walked in right as I was taking off my heavy respirator mask. The contrast between us in that moment was almost comical. He was wearing a tailored charcoal suit, his tie perfectly dimpled, holding 2 iced coffees from the cafe down the street. He didn't cross the threshold into the workroom. He never did. He hated the dust. He hated the fumes. He stood safely on the clean showroom floor, looking at me like I was a mechanic covered in grease. "Hey, babe," he said, holding out a sweating plastic cup. He smelled like expensive eucalyptus body wash and cedar cologne, a sharp, manufactured scent that aggressively clashed with the heavy historical smells of old wood, beeswax, and chemical solvent in my shop. He wrinkled his nose, stepping back as a stray puff of sawdust settled near his polished leather shoes. "How much longer are you going to be back there? The smell of that old wood and whatever chemicals you're using is suffocating. It gets in your hair. You're going to smell like a lumberjack at dinner." He didn't touch me. He didn't lean in to kiss my cheek. He just set the coffee on a clean glass display case and walked back out to his truck. That was the physical flag, the sudden, intense aversion to the very environment that paid our mortgage. We used cheap Irish Spring in our shower at home. He smelled like a high-end spa. The third flag was Thalia. She was our commercial realtor. She had handled the lease renewal for my shop the previous year. She was sharp, wore tailored suits that fit perfectly, and drove a pristine white Lexus SUV. She started commenting on Vance's Facebook posts, not just the big milestones like Silas's birthday or our anniversary. She commented on a picture of a burnt grilled cheese sandwich he had made for Silas on a random Saturday. "Looks like you're mastering the domestic arts," she wrote, appending a winking emoji. I mentioned it casually while we were folding laundry in the bedroom. "Thalia is pretty active on your page lately." "Did you guys stay in touch after the lease signing?" Vance rolled his eyes, aggressively snapping a towel in the air before folding it. "She's a networker, Odelia. She's just keeping her face in front of former clients. It's how real estate agents get referrals. Don't read into it. You're always looking for a problem where there isn't one." The temporal changes came next. His logistics job suddenly required overnight trips to Gallup, a town 2 hours away. He had never stayed overnight in Gallup before. "Supply chain issues," he said, packing a small leather duffel bag. "The new warehouse manager is an absolute idiot. I have to hold his hand through the entire quarterly inventory process." The fracture moment happened on a Sunday morning. I was organizing the glove compartment in his truck, looking for an updated insurance card because I needed to renew the registration, and I found a crumpled receipt shoved deep into the back corner, wedged beneath an old tire pressure gauge. It was from a boutique luxury hotel in Taos, dated for the exact night he was supposedly doing inventory in Gallup. My stomach dropped. The physical sensation of betrayal is always exactly the same, no matter who you are. Your ears start ringing, a high-pitched whine that drowns out the ambient noise of the world. Your mouth goes completely dry, as if you've swallowed a spoonful of sand. You feel like you are standing behind yourself, a ghost watching a movie of your own life play out on a screen. I took the receipt inside. I laid it flat on the kitchen counter, smoothing out the wrinkles. When Vance walked in from mowing the lawn, wiping sweat from his forehead, I pointed to it. He didn't flinch. "A liar looks at your hands." He watched my fingers resting on the cold granite of the countertop. He saw that my fingernails were stained with dark walnut wood dye. He saw that my hands weren't shaking. "Oh, yeah," he said casually, opening the fridge and grabbing a lime sparkling water. He popped the tab. It hissed loudly in the quiet kitchen. "Mark used my card." Mark was his coworker, a guy from the accounting department. "Why would Mark use your corporate card for a luxury boutique hotel in Taos?" I asked. My voice sounded hollow, echoing in my own skull. "Because Mark is going through a nasty divorce and his wife froze his primary checking account," Vance said smoothly, taking a long drink of water. "He needed a room for a weekend trip with his kids to get away from the drama. He paid me back in cash the next Monday. I can show you the cash in my safe if you want to count it." He had an answer for everything. It was so plausible. It was so perfectly constructed, delivered without a single stutter or break in eye contact. I nodded. I apologized for being suspicious. I went back to the shop, put on my heavy canvas apron, and spent 4 hours aggressively sanding a pine farmhouse table until my arms ached. My gut was screaming at me. Every instinct I had honed over a decade of spotting fakes and forgeries, noticing the wrong patina on a brass handle, the incorrect dovetail joint on a drawer, was telling me the man sleeping in my bed was a counterfeit. But I overrode it, because men who cheat don't leave their phones face up on the table while they play with their children. Men who cheat don't volunteer to help you catalog dusty estate sale finds on a Friday night. That Sunday morning, After the cafe incident with the barista's napkin, I decided to do one small thing. I didn't tell him, and that one small thing broke the entire illusion wide open. After the barista handed me that receipt, I drove home in absolute silence. The radio was off. Silas was asleep in his car seat in the back, his small chest rising and falling rhythmically. Vance was driving his own truck, having gone straight to the hardware store from the cafe to buy mulch for the front flower beds. I carried Silas inside, kicked off my shoes, and put him in his bed, pulling his favorite dinosaur blanket over his shoulders. Then I went straight to the kitchen. I picked up the shared iPad, the one where Vance had disabled the iMessage sync to protect himself. I catalog things. I know how systems work. I understand the architecture of things. He had unlinked the text messages, but he had completely forgotten about the iCloud photo stream. I opened the Photos app. I scrolled past hundreds of pictures of Silas at the park, pictures of antique chairs, pictures of our dog. I clicked on the hidden folder at the bottom of the albums list. It required a passcode. I typed in Silas's birthday. Incorrect. I paused. The kitchen was dead silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I thought about Thalia. I thought about the crumpled receipt from Taos. I typed in Thalia's birthday, which I knew because she had loudly complained about turning 34 during our lease signing the previous year. The folder unlocked. There were 84 photos. I sat heavily on the wooden kitchen stool. The ringing in my ears became a deafening roar. It wasn't just photos of them kissing. It was photos of them in the Taos hotel room, wearing plush white robes, holding champagne flutes. It was photos of them at a vineyard in Bernalillo, her arms wrapped around his neck. It was a photo of Thalia wearing my husband's familiar blue button-down shirt, standing barefoot in a massive modern kitchen I didn't recognize. And then there was a screenshot. It was a text exchange between Vance and someone saved in his phone as T. Vance, the shop is bleeding money anyway. Once I finalize the transfer, I'm cutting the cord. I can't stand the smell of old wood on her anymore. It makes me sick. Thalia, just get it done, baby. The escrow closes on the 15th. We need the cash clear by then. I didn't know what escrow they were talking about. We weren't buying property. We lived in a house we had owned for 6 years. I heard the heavy rumble of Vance's truck pulling into the driveway. The engine cut off. The driver's side door slammed shut. I locked the iPad screen, set it exactly where I found it on the counter, down to the millimeter, and walked to the kitchen sink. I turned on the cold water and splashed my face until the burning behind my eyes stopped. When he walked in, holding a massive bag of cedar mulch over his shoulder, he smiled at me. "Hey, babe, Silas still down?" "Yeah," I said, wiping my face with a dish towel. My voice was completely steady. "He's out cold." That night, the soft confrontation began. We were eating dinner at the dining room table. I cut a piece of roasted chicken, chewed it, swallowed, and looked at him over the rim of my water glass. "Vance, I was looking at the shop's accounts today while Silas was napping. We seem to be strangely short on the cash reserves. Did you move money for the Santa Fe fund?" He didn't look up from his phone. His thumb kept scrolling. "Yeah, I transferred a chunk of it to the high-yield savings account last week. Better interest rate. Inflation is killing us right now." "Can I see the statement?" I asked, my tone perfectly conversational. He finally stopped scrolling. He looked up. His eyes narrowed, a subtle tightening of the muscles around his temples. This was the entrance to the gaslight chamber. "Odelia, why are you interrogating me right now? I handle the finances. Have I ever missed a bill? Has the mortgage ever been late?" "No, I just want to see the balance. It's my business, Vance." He dropped his fork. It clattered sharply against the porcelain plate. "You know what your problem is. You're paranoid. You're stressed about the shop's foot traffic dropping this quarter, so you're projecting your anxiety onto me. You're acting crazy." "I just asked for a bank statement, Vance." "It's a piece of paper." "And I'm telling you, I'll print it out when I get to the office on Monday. I don't have access to the portal on my phone. I can't believe after everything I do for this family, you'd sit there and accuse me of hiding things from you." He stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor, scraped his half-eaten plate into the trash can, and walked out of the room. The next day, I didn't wait for him to print a doctored fake statement. I drove to our local bank branch on Lomas Boulevard. I walked inside, sat down with a personal banker at a desk near the back, and handed her my driver's license and my official business incorporation documents. "I need a full, unredacted printout of all accounts associated with my Social Security number and my business tax ID," I said. The banker typed on her keyboard for a few minutes. She clicked her mouse, frowned, and looked at the screen closer. "Including the commercial equity loan." I froze. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "What commercial equity loan?" "The one issued 6 months ago. The line of credit secured against the physical inventory of your business." She printed the documents, stapled them, and handed them to me in a neat stack. I walked out of the bank, sat in my car in the sweltering parking lot, and read them line by line. Vance had taken out a massive loan. He had used my entire antique inventory, pieces I had spent a decade sourcing, painstakingly restoring, and cataloging, as collateral. He had forged my signature on the application, the notary stamp on the final page certifying that I had supposedly signed the document in person belonged to Thalia. The total amount withdrawn from the loan, plus the cash he had methodically siphoned from my sales over the last 2 years, was exact: $213,800, $213,800, gone, evaporated into thin air. He hadn't just cheated on me. Infidelity is common. Infidelity is a cliche. He had financially gutted me. He was going to leave me with a bankrupt business, a massive loan I couldn't possibly pay back, and no inventory to sell. He was going to leave me and Silas destitute. That night, the trickle truth began. I decided to play entirely dumb. I needed time to build my cage. "Vance," I said, while we were standing at the bathroom sinks getting ready for bed, "Clara called me today." Clara was his older sister. "She said she saw you and Thalia getting lunch downtown near the plaza." He froze with his electric toothbrush in his mouth. The motor hummed loudly in the quiet bathroom. He spat into the sink, rinsed his mouth, and wiped his face with a towel. "Yeah, we grabbed a quick sandwich between meetings. We were discussing a potential storefront in Nob Hill for you. I wanted to surprise you." Rung 1, complete denial of reality. "Clara said you were holding hands across the table." He sighed, a long, performative, theatrical sigh of a weary victim. He leaned against the door frame. "Oh, Delia, we weren't holding hands. I cut my palm on a piece of flashing in the garage this morning. She was looking at the cut. You are obsessing over this woman. It's getting weird." "Are you sleeping with her?" I asked, flat, direct, unblinking. He turned around, his face transformed into a mask of pure indignation.